Scott Tournet, welcome to Living on Music, my friend.
For having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you, man. And again, I've known your face and your name for a long time, for various reasons, and we'll talk about those. But what I love that's going on, Scott, is you seem to be cranking at the moment too, which is wonderful. You're known for being the frontman for Electric Voodoo back in the day, and that is that continuing now, or is that was that a past history?
It's technically still alive.
Right?
Um, San Diego, and I'm in Maryland, so it's just been tricky. I've been getting my own thing off the ground for the last year and a half, and some of the guys in that band are kind of doing their own thing. So we love each other. We're still alive, hopefully in the future, but it hasn't been for like a year and a half. We haven't played a gig.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering where that was because I loved some of the critiques. There was one Taste of the Flaming Lips, Santana, Tame Impala, and the Arcade Fire break through this soulful collection of songs. I love Glide magazine stuff, and the stuff sounds wonderful. It's a great ride too. Scott Tournay and the Spark. That's something that we'll talk about too because that seems to be going right now, right?
That's my current focus right
How did
now.
that get
Yeah.
kicked off?
Moving to Maryland in the middle of the pandemic,
Wow.
wrote an album, did it all myself because, limitations and such. And then I was like, well, I want to play a gig and I want to meet some people where I live now. And I met my keyboard player, Bronson Hoover, and
Oh,
he's just the greatest guy and a great musician. And he introduced me to Jeff Reed, my bass player, who's highly respected in the area. And then he turned me on to Ricky Wise, who is
right.
a marvel in his own right, and I lucked into this wonderful band.
Oh, that's great. I saw some dates coming up. You've got some really neat stuff coming up as well as playing some continued solo work, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great because I know that was a big part of who you are with your three solo records, at least three. Talk a little bit about Rock and Roll Stories. When was that released? And it seems like that's cranking.
That was released about 11 months ago.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, at the end of August, early September last year, and it did well. It did pretty well on radio, which was exciting. We were on the Relics like jam band radio charts for like 6 months, which is
Nice.
awesome. I don't know if it's a jam band record per se, but I'll take it where I can get
Right.
it.
That's
um,
that's wonderful.
Third was I'd been doing Electric Voodoo. We did three records. We finished our third record about 2 weeks before the pandemic happened, which was kind of heartbreaking,
Wow.
you know, and in the way that we had these grand plans for it. We waited a year, we put so much heart and soul into it. And then we went on a tour in 2021 to support it. And then two of the guys got COVID. And it's
Oh,
just like one of these things where it's like we just kind of couldn't win, and we put so much love and energy to it. I'm so proud of the record.
I've been peering through a telescope, looking at the world up close, but never opening up both eyes. Well, I didn't want to let it in, but the darkness always wins. When the memory rules my mind. If you've lost somebody, if you've lost somebody, if you've lost somebody, then you know what it's like. You don't really want to talk about it.
But I think after that 2021 tour, I was just kind of like a little, it was just in rough shape. I think after the pandemic, after that, it was kind of
yes.
like, I mean, what am I doing? I was pretty lost. in career wise, family wise was great. And I was in Maryland, kind of by myself, musically speaking. And I just was like, I took a month off and was like, I can't even do music for a month. I'm just fried, which for me is pretty rare.
Right.
And one day I was like, I kind of feel like making recording today. And like, what am I going to do? Like, I didn't have it in me to start number 4 record for Electric Voodoo, after all
Right.
that hard. Let's just do whatever you want, and just start recording. Pick up your guitar, because with Electric Voodoo, that would be the last thing that I would generally write with. I would usually write with other things. And it was just like, just be who you are. You're an electric guitar player kind of at heart. That's kind of the first thing I really got good at.
Right.
It's just kind of like with Electric Voodoo, often I was trying to be, and even the solo record before that, I was always trying to be like smart, or kind of like throw curveballs and like like what would Pitchfork like. Long story short, Rock and Roll Stories was kind of a return to form, coming from the Nocturnals. In a way, I wasn't trying to recreate that per se, but I was just kind of trying to kind of take off any musical masks and just kind of go the Neil Young route, with like
Nice.
interference possible, right to the
Yeah.
source, and just do whatever without analyzing it or like worrying like, is this cool, would this group of people like it or not like it, and just being like, I like it,
Right.
you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what I love that you would mention about how you got through some of the pandemic, what it did to you positively and negatively. And I started this show. I've been a journalist for 25 years. I've in television for 40, so I'm an older guy. But I've had a wild run, and I started living on music on Zoom and now on YouTube and everything because I wanted to interact with musicians and local and world famous, and I was able to do that, and there was a common, theme which people really found a way to get through it because they created music, whether it was by themselves or people on Zoom itself or other ways. It seems like although it kicked everybody's ass, it really did, and I'm sure in some ways it did for you. It seems like it also gave you some time to do some things.
Sure, I mean, it was a blessing in disguise in
Yeah.
that moved back east. I think really my wife and I, we just had our son at the time, and her family is from here. That's kind of why my
Oh,
family's my parents. So at least, I'm still far-ish away from them, but relative to San Diego, I can drive there in a day. And they're, getting older. So, it was a kind of a scary move because I had been in San Diego for a decade and, developed this group. But, you know, in the hindsight, I'm so glad we did. I think that was kind of the other thing with the record too, is like being an East Coaster, like
right.
living in right next to Mexico. It's like I'm feeling like Latin rhythms. I'm feeling different kinds of music kind of through. It's sunny every day. It's a different energy, that just comes into you. And then coming back east, it was like fall starts hitting. I'm like, oh yeah, here comes the darkness. Like, bring back the rock.
Right.
But it
Right.
was like familiar, I'm like, yeah, this is what I know in my heart. This is what I grew up with.
Exactly. I can't wait to talk a little bit about that because I'm a New Englander myself. I grew up in Connecticut and went to Boston University and also just went to Maine for a wedding. One of my best friend's daughters got married, and just great to be back there. And we did a New England trip a couple of years ago and drove all around. So we'll talk about that. You are also, do you do continue to do lessons?
I do. Yeah.
That
That's what I started that during the pandemic out of kind of, you know,
yeah.
but I
No, that
enjoy it. I mostly teach adults, and I kind of only work with people who are passionate about it, regardless of level. I don't care if it's like a beginner, but it's like they need to be excited. For me, I feed off that energy.
I love that. And was that something that you had been doing for a long time and or just began to say I can do this?
I had my last straight job when I was 24 years old.
Hmm.
And started teaching lessons and kind of doing gigs. And then after joining the Nocturnals, we started touring full time and I let go of the lessons. And then I didn't teach again until 2020,
Right.
and that was kind of like everything shut down, all the gigs shut down. I was not able to get unemployment like a lot of my musician buddies, for various reasons. And when I was like, uh-oh, you know, and at first it kind of felt like a bit of a punishment, and then now I kind of enjoy it. I also teach a lot of like songwriting and production, and like I kind of very bass, slide guitar, this thing, so it's not like, okay, here we go again, like guitar lesson 101, like here comes Wish You Were Here. Like I think I would maybe be banging my head against the
Right.
wall if I had, you know
Hmm.
it's flowing.
I love that you do that because I've watched you've been playing and watched what you've been doing, especially when we've been, I've been getting ready for this, and I love the music that you create. And so you're teaching people can't hurt. That's wonderful. Going back a little bit, again, that's how we'll talk a little bit about, life with Grace and things like that, and beginning that. But you were born in the Berkshires of Massachusetts.
Yes, sir.
That
Pittsfield, Mass. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
that is great. As I was saying, I grew up in Wilton, Connecticut, and born in '61 back there, and loved New England very much. We went to Nantucket every summer for about 10 years when I was a kid. You moved to rural Vermont. Where in Vermont?
Yeah, I was born in Pittsfield, grew up in Williamstown, Vermont,
Oh,
which was idyllic, is maybe the right word, in that it was like this progressive college town. And me and I grew up with two older brothers, and we could go use the gym and the college pool and ride our bikes around town, and everything was close. And you know it's like everything was pretty awesome, where we grew up. And so then we moved to Vermont,
right.
Chester, Vermont, when I was 10, and that was, pre-internet. So it was a total culture shock. My parents bought 35 acres, and then discovered that we did not have electric poles on our road,
That's
that
right.
then quarter-mile driveway. So in 1980, whatever, it was, what would have been like $35,000 to get electric, and which back then was a fortune. So it was like, well, what do we do now? We live without electricity. So yeah, from the time I was 10 till I was 15, we lived without electricity, starting with like an ice box, and kerosene lamps, then evolving to, gas, stuff. So we'd actually had like a real fridge and some gas lights.
Oh,
And we had a generator, but we could only run it like 40 minutes a day to like fill up. So we had batteries for the radio. We ran our TV off of a car battery, like an old black and white TV off a car battery. And then when the car battery would slowly die, the screen would get smaller and smaller. You'd get closer to the TV as like your pro, so it was unique. At the time I was like, why are you guys so weird? Why are you doing this to us? Now I look back, I'm like, well, that was cool for I learned to be creative, and use my imagination and go run through the woods, and do all
right. I
sorts
mean, you were able to handle it as a kid though, because you were growing up and that was what you knew life was. So it was okay.
of choice when you're a kid, and it's
Yeah.
just, me and my eldest brother was cool with it. He's a little different, and me and my brother, close, we were just like, what have you done to us? Like all our friends have Nintendos and cable TV, and we also lived like 6 miles out of town. So it was like, like going to the store was like a big deal.
What was the reason that your folks moved to that property?
um I think my mom kind of I think they both had this like kind of back to the land, you
Right.
know, see, in a way. And it's become what they love. They now live in another town in Vermont, about an hour away, but they live on 110 acres and have donkeys and chickens, and
Oh my
that's
God.
and they spend all their time and their put all their heart into like building up this world around. They've got like three barns and flower farm. My mom has a flower farm, and they garden. That's kind of their thing. They don't really go on a lot of vacations. It's their home is their sanctuary.
Yes, I bet it sounds beautiful, and it's a great place up there. You talk a little bit about the fact that you always knew music was something, but you did where school was not the place to begin it.
Well, also, as I mentioned, where we moved to culturally was like kind of like 2 years behind where we had come from.
Oh,
So like, this is pre-internet. It's hard to explain now, I think, to younger kids of like things didn't travel like they do now. There wasn't YouTube, there wasn't social media where you can be anywhere and be connected. It's like I remember we had like those, they're called like pogo balls. I don't know if you remember those. There was like yeah, and we had those
oh,
in where we moved from Williamstown. They just hit when we left, and then like 2 years later, they hit where we moved to. We're like, my brother was the first guy to bring in like rap tape, like music. He had a rap collection of like, Beastie Boys, Run DMC, LL Cool J,
yeah.
and he was like Kevin Bacon, like in Footloose, like it was like, it was just, I mean, I ended up making like some of my best friends forever, and there's obviously wonderful people there, but it was just like, I didn't even know you could be in a band. Like, there weren't bands. I think there was like three kids that might have played, guitar, and it was maybe more of like a Eddie Van Halen kind of a thing,
Right.
which is cool, but it just didn't land for me as much. So yeah, anyways, I just didn't know what it was. Finally, when like my senior year of high school, like a couple of my friends played guitar. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, And then, but when I went to college, my freshman year, like everyone in has an acoustic guitar in college, like everyone down the hall. So that's really my first exposure. And that was like mid 90s, also in the resurgence of all those box sets were coming out on CD, So it was like Zeppelin, the Allman Brothers and the band, and Pink Floyd and kind of Hendrix and all that kind of classic rock 101. And I was so green, it was like, that was all. I remember I got picked on by this one like kid with a mohawk because I thought Van Morrison and Jim Morrison were brothers.
Oh, that's great. Oh my God. Who knew? That is hilarious. Oh my God.
What Oregon Garth Hudson was playing in the basement tapes, what I mean? But like back then, yeah, the Lowry, I like just, you just don't know until
Right. I mean, and it's amazing. So you discovered the guitar through friends, neighbors. One taught you music, and that's where it really did that begin the world of Scott Tournet's unbelievable guitar life?
really. I played sports through high school. I was okay, you know what I mean? But I liked them. That was probably my first passion, was probably baseball, but it was fading as I kind of got old, 17, 18. It was kind of like, all right, like I'm not going to be a professional baseball player. Now what? Yeah. So it was kind of like, I don't know. I went to like a state college just
Hmm.
because it was like, go to a state college, you can join the military, or you can, stay home in the ski town we lived in, and like, shovel snow and be a landscaper.
Right.
Those are my options. I was like, I don't, the Marines seems a little hard. I don't really like manual labor. I think I'll choose college.
Right.
So I did direction, no clue, and then luckily, yeah, 18, go freshman year and just like fall in love with the guitar. It really took hold my sophomore year, but probably halfway through my freshman year, like this is really cool. I like this. And then that summer I brought, a Fender Squire home and I
Oh,
sucked.
oh,
The next year, like something clicked and I could play a solo kind of before I could do much else, oddly enough.
wow.
Like guitar came first, and I could kind of fake it on like a one string solo. I knew how to be expressive, and I would learn like the one scale up and down the string, and like that's kind of was my entry, and I've been faking it ever since.
Well, yeah. Well, you locked yourself. I love in you really found a way to learn because you locked yourself in your dorm room and kind of just concentrated on guitar, didn't you?
Became obsessive because I think the benefit is that I think that I knew I was behind, so I had to catch up, so it kind of lit a fire under me
Yeah.
of like, I would tell people as a sophomore, like, I think I want to do this music thing. And, definitely a lot of people were like, I'm like, you're not that good yet, And so I kind of, I don't know, it just lit a fire under me. And then my junior year, I actually I tried to major in music and it was a bad match, and I ended up dropping out and
Right.
staying for track all day. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And you transferred here, right?
Goddard College. Yeah,
That
after about a year of washing dishes and realizing that the that world of job, like those kinds of entry level jobs, where I was not going to cut it.
right.
Went to
Did that
college with no grades and clothing optional.
and that right. And that turned a corner though? Did Goddard really turn a corner for you?
It's like a cultural explosion, oddly enough, and with a student body of 135, in the
Wow.
middle of small town in Vermont, oddly enough, I just got exposed to everything. I mean, like Delta Blues, Woody Guthrie, Sun Ra, Electric Miles, Albert King, BB King, Phish. That's where the band Phish went. So
Love them.
I liked them. That was they were a tangible proof that like people that everyone else I liked was either dead or kind of this like untouchable icon of like a Jimmy Page or something.
Right.
Like Phish was like, okay, like these guys, they're from Vermont. They're not really dressed all that well. They're not doing any kind of weird, like, it's not Prince, where
Right.
it's like, it was like, it made it tangible. I think that's good for an aspiring musician to see somebody from like their background doing it.
Right. You must be fond of Trey Anastasio's playing.
He was one of my early heroes. Yeah, big time.
I just
I love
saw
what.
they were just on Fallon about a month ago. And
Yeah.
did evolve, and I was just sitting there going, it was that whole fish sound, and by the end of the song, you're dancing with them, and then I love that you love them, and also you played. Did you play with them, open for them at some point later too?
And '06, '05, '06, we with Grace we opened for Trey for about three different shows when he was doing his
That's true.
solos. That record Shine, and we also did a tour with Mike Gordon. He was doing a thing called Ramble Dove, which
Nice.
was like a country thing. Yeah, and so we probably did like seven. I got to hang with Mike probably the most, and then I even got to jam with him a few times.
Oh,
Some
that's
like at a festival. And I got to, kind of, he would be the most accessible. He would come down to like Burlington and come out. He came to like one of my early solo albums, like the album release like show. There's Mike all of a
nice.
sudden.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
boots on the ground. Oddly enough, he seems like the least accessible one in some ways because he's kind of Mike. He's kind of floating up here,
Right.
this person, but he loves to be in the mix.
Oh, that's neat to know. I love that band and always have. You after graduating from Goddard, you moved to upstate New York, and it was right around St. Lawrence University. Started playing bass in a hip hop band, and then you met Matt Burr, and then was introduced to this lady. All right, that again, that's where I knew your face. I think a lot because I had been a big fan. Got to interview her in 2016 and 2020. So it was right after I think you had gone on to your next phases of your life. But boy, what a run and what a time. The first time you'll get a laugh was at the 930 Club. I had interviewed her. It's kind of my full thing. I always love to interview people for a while and then meet them because it's just it's full circle and you get to say, hey, plus I wanted to meet Grace. How would I not? So I went backstage and she's doing the hair of her assistant by herself. And I'm like, hey, Grace, what are you doing? And she goes, well, I got him a gig at a midnight at a club. So she had booked her entire staff at a club in DC and she was doing her assistant's hair. So I got to meet her for the first time there. Talk to me a little bit about, how that began to be a real amazing jump in your career and a wonderful run for you. I would hope. But I'm curious from your perspective, why it began. Why do you think it kicked off so well? And again, she is continuing to seem to roll on now.
Yeah, no, I'm very proud of what we did.
I bet.
It's a ride of 11. That was my dream, from the time I started playing guitar. well, I would set small goals. I always tell this, and I tell this to my students. When I first started playing, first thing I wanted to do was play rhythm guitar while my friend played lead guitar.
Right.
Then I
Okay.
wanted to be, well, good enough so that he wouldn't get bored while he was playing bar chords. Then my next goal was to, play with a drummer. Then after that, and to be all these very small goals, play in a basement with a full band, play a house party, play at a bar, so it was never like when people come to me like, well, I want to make, $1 million a year and be, fly on jets and be a rock star. I'm like, well, let's slow down. Like, let's walk up the ladder one rung at a time. So by the time I got to Northern New York, I had a college band, and we had done, a few shows like out of the state, like, bare bone, not really touring, but that
Right.
was like my everything, like that was my dream. And then Goddard actually had the on-campus program shut down,
Oh,
and the band kind of fell apart right after I graduated, and it just,
yeah.
like as college bands do, it's still great friends with all the guys to this day,
Great.
but and then I was really lost of, what am I supposed to do? I fell in love at the time with my ex-girlfriend, who we were together for 7 years,
Right.
and she was going to St. Lawrence University. She's like, why don't you just move up here? She lived off campus, and so I went up there with no plan, kind of almost throwing in the towel a little bit of kind of like, well, whatever, things are great with her. See what happens. I go up there. My last job ever was working at a video store.
Oh,
That was the first time I met Grace. She came in to, everyone else was renting like Fast and Furious 5. And like she came in and rented like Les Mis or something, and like somehow like she said she was from Vermont, and we kind of, briefly met, but didn't really, I didn't even know she did music or whatever. Then my ex-girlfriend at the time came home one day. She's like, well, I've been singing. She was a singer. She's like, I've been singing with this jazz funk hip hop band. The drummer's not too great. He just started playing drums, and bass players keep quitting. Like, we have a rehearsal. Will you just come for the rehearsal? And I had a bass. It was one of these things where it was just like, whatever. Like, let's lark. That drummer was Matt Burr, who also started playing music at age 18. But he was a little younger than me, so at the time he was probably 21. 3 years in, just kind of just getting it together. And I just did that really just, with no serious intentions. And it became kind of fun. We won like the Battle of the Bands, and whatever. And then at the time he was like, well, I've been hanging out with this girl, Grace, and she does this. And so that's kind of how it came to be. They had like an upright bass player, and it was like Nora Jones, like Joni Mitchell, Bonnie Raitt, real mellow, like, and so I would like eventually he was like, well, will you come like sit in with us and play a few songs? And I would sit down and play slide guitar. And I remember we got like hushed one night, like we were in the bar room next to a dining room, and like we got a little like, a little too bluesy, the maitre d comes in, so that was really like we were not cool either. Like we couldn't get a Saturday night gig at like the Java Barn, which was like the cool place for the jam bands to play. Like we were kind of like the professors and like the grown-ups liked us, but we would play brunches and like, yeah, I think they played a nursing home once, like just before art galleries. It was just like it was so the opposite of what it became. It's unbelievable.
oh, that's wild. Yeah, I'm in one of my duos. We play 4 adult daycare center gigs a month. And that it's an incredible experience to make these people who are often hurting and, have been dropped off at the adult daycare center for their day. And then they're dancing to this music and so happy. But again, that you were doing this. I love the fact that it was really it was you and Matt who turned her onto some music that might have kicked her into where she is today with this rock and roll feel that she became part of.
Matt and I bonded a lot aesthetically. I think, I remember feeling very out of place at the time. because I was really getting into records and like really into like the band and Taj Mahal and like Little Feat and just and like soul, like and old blues and just like stuff from like the early 70s, like early Neil Young. It was like really resonating with me, JJ Cale,
Ooh,
and feeling like nobody my age was into that stuff, like feeling like a bit of an outlier, but really believing in what I liked. And so Matt and I think, he liked some of that stuff. And so there was, power in numbers, you start to like question yourself when it's just you sometimes. You have to have really strong, like, staying power to really, do something outside the norm and believe in it and stick with it. And I think there was something that we kind of gained a strength from seeing like that. We both thought this was cool. So we're like, well, maybe this is really cool. And then Grace was hip to some of it. Like her family more was, I think, some more of the traditional hippie kind of Crosby, Stills and Young, like Nash. Like her parents had some of that stuff.
hmm.
She was a little more into like contemporary kind of stuff. I think that just worked. She was good at that. And then so we were like, well, why don't we trade in that Kurzweil piano and get a B3 organ? So
Right.
that was really the first step. And then just hanging out. And so me and my ex, who's Jen Kroll, she sang on the first two records as well, actually, and became our tour manager for a while. So she was kind of a big part of it as well. And Matt and Grace, we became couple buddies. You know how that is, So we would have little dinner parties and suck down a couple bottles of wine, and then eventually we would drive over the border to Ottawa, Canada, and go buy records, and go. We'd each, have so much money, and you pick like seven, and we'd come back and we'd trade turns. Like, you listen to one, I listen to one, and you'd like miss on some of them. Back in the day, you like. I got this George Harrison record called Extra Texture that Matt would always make fun of me because it was like just I hate it. I love George Harrison so much, but it was like that's a shitty album.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, that's classic. I did you get that a sense that she really had the talent to go places in a career when you met up with her and were doing this?
Not like I knew she was good, but I never looked at her that way, and it was harder as we got bigger when people would come at, you know, being like, "Don't you see she's a star?" It was kind of like, well, no, she's kind of my younger sister. Like we're contemporary. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was like, we were all on par. I mean, she was the leader in name, but really, like Matt and I were kind of more the leaders, kind of like direction wise, like in like, well, let's go to my college, Goddard College, and go record in the barn on a stage, and like let's do it this way, and like let's get you a Fender Rhodes or a Wurlitzer, or like we kind of like we wanted to push away from like certain sounds and tones that we deemed cheesy. Like something for me has always been, and sometimes I think it comes off the wrong way as I'm being like judgmental or something. It's like I find often what I don't want to sound like in order to figure out what I do want to sound like, and it's
Yeah.
not like a slam on anyone else, but like Matt and I would laugh about like we were anti chimes, no chimes would make it onto the record, no like digital reverb would make it onto the record. I remember the record Nothing But the Water, we would go mix it with the engineer, and we'd catch him trying to sneak on because he kind of was of this era and had a certain kind of more slick sound, which we didn't want.
Right.
Under Ross, like, is that reverb on there? Like, well, no, take the reverb off. Like, we were reverb Nazis, Uh, so so that, but I mean, no, I mean, I knew she was talented. I trusted in her, when we would perform, I think we trusted in each other. Her and I, particularly, I think were kind of formed the tightest on stage bond, I would say,
Hmm.
in that I think us were, I mean, Matt was theatrical as well, but I think maybe because I was standing up and we would engage more, I think, or challenge each other. She would do this thing vocally at the end of the song, and I would respond to it with the guitar, and it was almost like a sword fight of like who can, who can like swing for the fences harder, and I think we pushed each other in that.
Oh, totally.
And slowly we start to evolve and get into some better, more like, okay, now we're in like a rock setting or a blues setting. And I would stand up, and I think she was like, well, shit, he's standing up. Like, I want to stand up, because she was a keys player only, so I think that led her to come out with the guitar at first. Um, and just like these little challenges in that, again, going one rung up the ladder at a time to evolve into something different. So
Sure.
first we were singer songwriter. Then our first break really was opening for Robert Cray,
Mm.
Taj Mahal, Mavis Staples. Like, we got on this agency called Rosebud Agency, and that was more of like a heritage blues kind of thing. So then it was kind of like, we appealed to the like, we kind of picked up on like what that audience was like, and it kind of fit with our evolution
Right.
of, that kind of stuff. We got into Taj Mahal early stuff, and we figured out that audience to a degree, and then we slowly were getting some jam band gigs. Then we started stretching things out, and then we started to get into like more wild rock and roll stuff and opening for Government Mule, and then that came more distorted guitars and running into the drums, and long way from the nursing home.
Right. I think that's when I saw you guys for the first time was with Government Mule. And I do remember you vividly through that. And I would think that, years later, Grace would look back and be instrumentally appreciative and thankful for you and Matt and what you did for her to kick her off the way you did.
I mean, I hope so. Yeah, I hope there's some fondness there. It could be challenging as we kind of evolved to
Right.
struggle like that. As other producers come in and kind of, as you get bigger and you sign to a label, they kind of, Matt and I started to get stripped of our duties of carrying a vision, and that was, part of the struggle, because I kind of disagreed with some of the visions of some of that stuff.
Sure.
I should have stayed a little more raw, through some of it. So that was a struggle, because I thought we had a good handle on it. We self-produced the first album, Nothing But the Water, and I thought that we didn't need to change that much. From that, I thought we should have continued to evolve. I was more of the vote that we should take the record label advance and build our own studio, kind of a la Wilco, and more take that approach to our destiny. You know, yeah. What are
Yes.
you gonna say? I mean, some of the stuff we did, I didn't love the record we did. This Is Somewhere. I think I liked the way it came out, but the process was painful, and the producer was controlling, and it just kind of squeezed all the dirt out of it.
Right.
Whereas the record, was probably our most poppiest, and that was the self-titled one. And I actually loved making that record. I loved the producer we worked with. Um, Oddly enough, like a hip hop producer, Mark Batson, who's was seems like an odd fit for us, but I'm still friends with him. I loved him. I thought he did a wonderful job with us. And he let us be us. He let us play together in a room and be dirty and be wild and be reckless, and somehow funneled that into a palatable album that can make it on radio, but still had, in essence, who we are. I mean, it might have been a little glossed up in some degree, But that was fun, and it was exciting. We recorded it in the studio where Michael Jackson made I think like two of his big records, and there was the room above the studio is called the Monkey Room, where he would keep his monkey. You know what I mean? It was LA big time.
Totally. That is great. Were there any songs from those days that if you look back and they stand out and say, that's what I love doing with Grace and Matt and that and the Nocturnals and stuff? Or there's anything that jumps out at you
um
still?
About the band, for the most part, for the majority of our journey, was that like we weren't a one or two song band. I mean, you could maybe looking from the outside, you could say like Paris or whatever was our biggest selling song. Our blessing and our Achilles heel was that we never had like a massive single. It was more like we were more of an album oriented
Hmm.
band. So I liked that. I mean, I really loved, we did a record at Sun Studios. It's not really officially a record,
Okay.
but YouTube, and we printed a vinyl of it. I thought that was very much us for real. It was right when we were touring with Government Mule. And it was just like no one got in the way. You know what I mean? We were there and there was an engineer who just kind of did whatever we asked him to do. And we were recording in Sun Studios where fucking Johnny Cash and Elvis, and that was so cool.
Jerry Lee
So
Lewis is looking at you and everybody. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
I love that
for
part.
the verses,
The
yeah.
chorus part, I feel like that's pushing the beat ahead a little bit.
Why don't I just go to the hat and keep
It's something it's more like that chorus is all about your kick and snare like combo
Grace,
of that.
what was
Like
that? Yeah, I agree.
You know, it's
put
like
your head down.
that part wants to get into this like the upbeat feel
The
you
part
almost
that
want to
feels
feel.
great is when I was like,
Yeah, that's right. The breakdown's good.
but I'm also wondering my pattern. All of a sudden when I was doing that, I was like, I wonder if my pattern stepping
Could you
on those toes.
drop like
I might be too busy.
Magic. So like the Meg White vibe feel like on the chorus more. That's because what I feel is like this up and down kind of feel, where it's like all of a sudden the people jump for the chorus kind of thing. Exactly. Go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But with
I like the less on your right hand, the better. The
Yeah.
more it seems to
Thank
stay in
you,
the
thank you,
pocket.
thank you, thank you. That was close.
I really loved it the most when we were on tour domestically. Because we would have our own gear and we'd be on our bus and we were generally left alone by the powers that be. And at that point, that's truly who we were, and it was more of a band than I think people understand. I think people look at it and they say like, oh, I saw her or I did that. And that I would always sting a little bit as somebody I put my whole heart into. It was a band, I was writing a bunch of the music.
Yeah.
I was teaching my daughter how to play guitar, how to play open tuning, how to do slide guitar, how to do, a lot of these things. And it was hard, I'm not gonna lie. Like that was a struggle to not feel like you're getting any credit for that, or to be like, oh dude, like it really was a band. Like we would be fighting behind the scenes about, I think we should open with this song, or like,
Right. Right. I can't, can't imagine that she wouldn't look back and give you a tremendous amount of credit getting her going. I can't I the way it seems and the way you were together on stage early on and the way you've done it with the music and kicked it off, I think that's a really neat thing that possibly would be something that she would never forget.
Yeah, I mean, she generally did when we'd be on stage and stuff, Um,
And
and I know,
yeah,
I co-wrote a lot, and I would come to her with ideas, or I would challenge her often too, of just being like, well, I don't think we should do that, or, because Grace she's so talented that she can kind of do a lot of different things. And
right,
sometimes that's actually her biggest challenge, I think, as an artist,
right,
in that, like, well, I can do a country thing, and I can do this thing, and I can do a pop thing, and I can do this like raw bluesy thing, and I can be this person, and I can be that person. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's great, because sometimes it can be almost a little ADHD if not properly funneled into like a vision, or or just like each album. Like, this album's my singer-songwriter album, or this album's a rock and roll album, as opposed to sometimes trying to jam too much into one thing. That was kind of my, I think, some of my and often Matt's role that helped was to try to like chisel away a little bit, chisel it down to a tighter sculpture.
What I did notice, Scott, and it was during your time with Grace and Matt and the whole thing with her, that you were also doing other things. Solo album right around the time that you started with them. Was that the Next to Canada record?
Yeah, you found Next to Canada. I've tried to bury my first two records. Good job.
Oh no, they're right here. No, but yeah, that was right as you started. So it seems like you definitely were on your mark to wanting to continue to do your own thing. You also had Blues and Lasers formed around 2007, so you'd been with the Grace world for about 4 years. Where was Blues and Lasers came with a couple of people from Grace's band,
I had done a couple of
your band.
small self-made solo records, like the that one you mentioned. I mean, I recorded in like a living room, like on like a Porta, crappy digi Porta, like no idea I was doing. But it was, I mean,
Yeah.
that's where that's where how I learned how to do a lot of this stuff. And then I made my second little solo record. And then I always had a bit of like I mentioned to you earlier before about singing. I had a struggle with singing and being out front, and being like a hard time, like being too forthcoming and honest, like in my songs, and then like enjoying the process of writing them, but not enjoying the process of performing them in front of a drunken bar room.
Right.
Like, just really struggling to find that balance.
Right.
And too vulnerable and kind of not ready to do that. And like after the show, just feeling like wrecked emotionally, to like, yeah, like embarrassed or not. I didn't want to like, it's just a lot. I had a contentious relationship with that. And
Right.
so Blues and was this like, kind of like a safety net around that, where it was like, it was like the AC/DC approach, where it's like, it's going to be heavy, it's going to be rock, it's going to be two drummers playing the same drum beat, it's going to be masculine. It had this like, and people loved it. I mean, it was very much like whiskey, leather, electric guitars, thing, which turned out to be really cool.
Oh
And so yeah,
wow.
with it was, I took Matt on as like a second drummer, with the drummer from my college band.
Oh.
um and just because we thought it would be fun. And then our original bass player, Brian Dondero, played bass in that as well. So really, at the time, it was all the Nocturnals minus Grace for this, and she loved it. She would come to the shows. Like, it wasn't a contentious thing. We actually went out and opened a bunch for the Nocturnals. Like, we would, we even got on the bus and did a couple small tours. That's where Benny Yurko joined. That's where I first met him. He was in Burlington and a guy on the scene, and so he joined, and so that's really what brought him into the Nocturnals. was that, and that's also that sound kind of then, got adopted into like the Nocturnal sound. Really, we weren't that heavy, and the Blues and Laser stuff was pretty heavy. And then right after that is, just naturally some of that energy started seeping into the Nocturnal stuff.
Oh,
We didn't
wow.
it didn't make it on the record quite as much because the producers would always fend that energy off, but that Sun Studios thing I'm talking about, like really half the songs on that could have been Blues and Lasers songs. It's
Wow.
just dirtier, filthier, more reckless kind of an energy.
And it seems like again you had this stuff churning through your period with Grace and the Nocturnals itself. Then about 2014, you decided, look, I want to, I really want to get out and rediscover what I'm doing creatively and the joy of music again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, but yeah, the whole time I, you know, I have many shortcomings. One of my blessings has just been an you know, quenchable thirst for creating and doing. I'm so into it. I'm like, I'm researching analog synthesizers and microphones and room treatments and songwriting technique. I just live for it.
Wow.
So I was always doing it, even like we'd get off tour and I'd have my little studio station set up and I'd be all into it. I'd be learning how to engineer and mix and watching videos. And really, I started writing more and more, but I always had an outlet outside the Nocturnals because I just had more stuff that I wanted to do. Like with the Nocturnals, I'd get 3 or 4 songs on maybe a record. But, when we signed to a label, we'd be putting out a record every 3 years. And that didn't really do it for me. Creatively, it was becoming, I kind of almost felt myself getting worse, especially you mentioned that, I don't know if it was before we got on that like stadium tour. That was kind of that and the final album, the album she put out called Midnight was that was a Nocturnals album. That turned into a solo album, but my all my those songs have my guitar solos.
Okay. Right.
People don't because my name's not on the record. But yeah, so I think it was that and that producer who worked with I really did not see eye to eye with. And what he wanted to do with us, he explained to me that to get on the radio, you need to do one of two things. You need to have electronic four on the floor where the drum beat is going like that, or you need to have a Mumford and Sons four on the floor. So it's like you can pick your poison, but it's going to be quantized and it's going to be four on the floor. And I just everything about that rubbed me the wrong way. I did not agree with that.
Right.
I was like, if we're going to get on the radio, I would like to do it in a way that's genuine. And so that was a breaking point. And then also the going on a whole tour, opening for Tim McGraw and Kenny Chesney and playing 30 minutes a night.
Yeah.
Cool. It was awesome. For 3 or 4 shows in the stadium was awesome. And then it was like, there's a bunch of people with their arms folded, holding red cups full of beer, and they just want to hear the song by Kenny Chesney that they like. They want to hear the no. Our tractor is not sexy.
Oh. Well, here you guys are behind me there. All right.
Walk up and down the catwalk and play a solo. But I kind of realized at a certain point too, like that's kind of where I get off the train a little bit in that like even like I love the Stones. I don't love the Stones as much in a stadium. Like I
Mm-mm.
don't really think the best rock and roll happens when you're 50 yards away from the drummer.
Yes.
You know, it's just call me a purist, call me old school. I don't know.
I
I
agree with
like to
you.
when we were Neil Young and Crazy Horse and we're sweating on each other and we're singing into the same mic and like I don't know, like that's more who I am.
Yeah.
And and then artistically, I think I also needed a break in that, like, I mean, in fairness to I'd done that for 13 years.
Yeah, you did. Do you think Grace was disappointed when you left?
I don't think so. No, I think she really had been wanting to go solo for a little while.
Okay.
I think she was ready to not meet any artistic resistance, which, I can understand that,
Yeah,
you know,
that's not uncommon.
yeah,
And it's also not uncommon for you to want to do what you wanted to do to move to the next step.
I think her and I probably in some ways were the closest. But then also in some ways there was the most tension between us. It was
Okay.
kind of that thing where there was definitely I was kind of like the foil a little bit, and in some ways I think that really drove the group, and in some ways I think she wanted to be free of that as well, like a teenager moving out or
Yeah.
something. um I have enough distance from it now where I can kind of look at it that way, and I wanted to, I think, not be, I think I was just ready to do my own thing too, and just do something weird and different. And I was coming from a background of like free jazz and Afrobeat and like weird, music in college that I studied that
Mm.
like I hadn't touched in years. And I'm dealing with a producer talking to me about Four on the Floor, and I'm like, well, I want to do fucking 6/8 now, like, like I've got a bit of the rebellious FU streak in me, which has served me well sometimes. But it's like if you tell me I have to do this, I'm gonna do that.
Oh God, that's great. I mean, you about what was it about a year after ending the run with Grace that you did Electric Voodoo?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of the similar thing as to how rock and roll stories evolved of just like, you know, just burrowing down and just doing something kind of for the love of it. At the time, I was very excited. I felt like I kind of cracked a code where I was writing like Afrobeat music that were like, but I was doing it to like 4-minute songs. It was kind of this amalgamation of like what I knew, 4-minute songs with this like West African Fela Kuti kind of like, the way he would build music, I was obsessed with. But I also didn't want to. The only other bands doing Afrobeat were like, I don't know if you know that much about that stuff, is like
A little bit.
was it what's the name of that band? They're out of Brooklyn. Can't think of their name right now. I will in a little bit. But
Hmm.
it's like it's a recreation of the Fela Kuti thing. They were the band when they did the Fela Kuti Broadway show. They were literally the band. So it was like they've got the dancers, it's literally it's amazing. They do an incredible job. Sometimes it might even be better than Fela stuff. But it was like, but it's a recreation. And a lot of Afrobeat bands are going to do an exact recreation of exactly how it goes. These 15 to 20-minute songs. You do this, then there's a horn solo. I'm a guitar player, so I was like, I want to play over Afrobeat music and play a guitar solo because so that was cool. It was really creatively rewarding and exciting to kind of feel like I kind of broke down the fifth wall or whatever of like, oh man, like you can make these 4-minute songs with this stuff and mash these things together, kind of, you know, and that was fun. It was hard because I had to go out with an 8-person band and start from scratch and play to 7 people.
Right. Oh God. Well, yeah, and it seems everybody was contributing in Electric Voodoo too, right?
Eventually, but I mean
Eventually.
the first album I did everything myself except for I had a drummer come in on 3 songs, and again, it wasn't out of like ego; it was out of necessity because I was living in San Diego. But again, I didn't really know any musicians because I was on tour all the time.
Right.
Yeah, home for a month, and I just want to be with my girlfriend and not travel.
Sure, understandable. Totally get that. You had electric video voodoo, and then yeah, during this time, I love this. Maybe give me a couple of nutshells of some of these people that you wrote and recorded with. I mean, people like Dan Auerbach, I love the Black Keys, Willie Nelson. What was the Willie Nelson experience?
Willie Nelson was with the Nocturnals. He came in and did the song Ragged Company with us.
Right.
First manager, this guy, Justin Goldberg, he's just an icon in his own right. His father was Jay Goldberg, the famous lawyer, who was so he was a lawyer for Willie Nelson, for Waylon Jennings, Miles Davis, BB King, Harry the Horse, like like mafia and stuff. So he's like this crazy. So Justin, our manager, kind of like grew up like going on to like Willie's bus when he was like 11. And so Justin kind of got us in, on Willie's radar. And so Willie wrote a nice blurb on our first album, Nothing But the Water. We got a blurb from Willie Nelson and Bonnie Raitt, both
Oh,
like band. It sounds, this yada yada yada.
oh.
You know, we went and we met Willie when we went to our first South by Southwest. We went and saw him at a show and had kind of an infamous, get on Willie's bus and leave a very different human being. Classic Willie experience. Yeah. Woo. And Willie Weed, watch out. Yeah. It's cool. He was nice. I think he liked Justin, and so he came in and did that song Ragged Company, and he invited us to do 2 Farm Aids, and he sat in with us for Farm Aid as well. So yeah,
Wonderful.
to be even in the same company as him, and he's
Yeah,
fucking Willie.
totally. I love that. That's fabulous. Alison Krauss.
Alison Krauss sang on a few of our songs. So I recorded with Alison. I didn't write. More so writing was Dan with the Black Keys.
Neat.
Did 3 songs with him. We did 3 songs written and recorded in 2 days at his studio, Easy Eye in Nashville, which was awesome. I mean, Dan's not the fuzziest guy. It was, I had visions of leaving and being best buds forever. That necessarily didn't happen. He's very, workmanlike. But that being said, he respected me. I did a good job, and I learned a lot. I mean, I've been a huge fan of his in the Black Keys since day one. I love especially the records leading up through El Camino were hugely influential on me. When I started Blues and Lasers, a part of what I wanted to sound like was them. Just that heaviness, the energy, the aggression. I like the way they recorded. I like his guitar tones. Yeah, I like the way he's become a producer. I love his production work; is incredible. What I gleaned from him was tempo, tempo and creativity. Some of the best producers I've worked with, there's a movement, there's a tempo. We're not going to get stuck on this song or this one part for an entire day.
Mhm.
If it's not happening, we're going to move on to something else. But they just have a way, the best people like that, to just push it through. It's like we're not getting snagged, which is just death in a recording studio. Where I've been in other situations where it was like, I'm working on one guitar part for a whole day. A record takes like 4 months. It's not fun. It's generally not exciting musically at the end. With Dan, it was like, that part wasn't perfect. All right, like just double it, play it again. And I'm like, I'll be like, but it's not. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, it sounds great.
God.
Like you listen to Led Zeppelin stuff, it's like if you listen in headphones or you hear Jimmy Page's guitar kind of isolated, it's like, oh, it's almost a little out of tune. It's just timing's a little wonky, like, but it's like these songs, like, it's like Tangerine. It's like we've been listening to that our whole lives, and it's perfect. What makes that so? I don't know. And that's
I don't
something I'm
know.
still chasing, supporting artist of like, when is it right? Because it's not always when it's perfect, And I think that's what a lot of people are missing in current recording and music is this, because of the computers we can just perfect it, and it strips away something. Why is James Brown funkier than Drum Machine?
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't either. Yeah, that's wild.
Tangent. It's the stuff that excites me. This is how my brain works.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? It seems like things are bouncing around for you well. I've been listening to rock and roll stories, man, and Cadillac and Fever I would play over and over when I started listening to them. I just love the way you sound. Are you happy with rock and roll stories?
Very happy. I'm very proud of it. And I did the whole thing 100% top to bottom. Well,
Oh,
by the end, on Bronson for some album art, but like it was important to me because financially it just became to a point where I just couldn't afford to do it. With what we're getting paid as musicians,
mhm.
getting less and less and less, but it's like you still are expected to pay the mastering engineer $2,000 to $3,000, and you still have to pay the printing cost. It's like our costs aren't going down, but what we're getting paid is going down, which is frustrating,
Right.
and
I bet.
so it's like, well, you got to toughen up. It was like you can quit and complain, or you can toughen up and learn how to do more stuff yourself.
Right.
And so I mixed it and I mastered it myself, and I'm really proud of that, you know. And I'm proud, like, it in that it's not a hack job either. That I got on the radio. And it's not like just as an ego thing. It was more of like a self-reliance kind of a thing.
Sure.
That made me feel good of like, well, no one can take away my creativity no matter what. Even if like even if the money's not coming in, I'm still gonna make records. Oh,
Well,
and when I teach people, that's also what I try to get across to them. It's like, if you can, your creativity kind of needs to live inside of you, where you like, you almost can defend it. No one can take it away from you. There's something I believe in about that.
yeah, that's wonderful. And Scott, I wish you the best of luck with this tour with Rock and Roll Stories. You have anything prospering that you're looking at in the next year or two, or it's just going to come as you see it comes?
Yeah, just shows coming up. I'm playing Charleston, West Virginia on the 16th, Knoxville, Tennessee on the 17th, Saugerties, New York, 24th,
Nice.
Purple Fiddle in West Virginia, and playing the Brooklyn Bowl with Deep Banana Blackout in September 24th, old school band. And yeah, I think I've got about an album's worth of new material, but I'm kind of taking my time in figuring out how and when to record it and what to do with it. I don't want to rush it because it's only been about a year coming up that the album's
Right.
been out. So I would
Right.
I would think maybe, you know, maybe probably I would say 2 years, a year and a half, I would have another record like after the one that came out.
Sure. Well, I'm going to wish you the best of luck. And again, thanks very much for being on Living on Music with me.
Steve, thanks for doing your research and being passionate about what you do as well.
I loved every minute of it, and thanks for all the music that you're giving me because I can't stop listening to friggin' rock and roll stories. So there you go. You got somebody listening to it amongst others. But thanks so much, and we'll keep in touch.